Okay, so here we have our front piece, our placket piece in both the main fabric and the knit interfacing, and I also have my placket pattern piece here for reference. Be sure that you have the correct size. The unisex kids sizing has 3 different placket pieces. One for sizes half through 6, one for sizes 7 through 10, and another for sizes 12 and 14. The men's and women's both only have 1 placket pattern piece. The first thing that you will do is iron your knit interfacing to the wrong side of your placket piece. Okay, now I am going to transfer all of the markings from my placket pattern piece onto my actual placket piece. I'm going to do this on the side that has the knit interfacing so that it's not seen once I'm finished sewing. I would like to add one disclaimer. I did do this with a permanent marker so that you guys could easily see it. I would not recommend doing this on a daily basis. I would make sure you use an appropriate fabric pen for this. Okay, so next you are going to crease along each of these outside lines. So this one right here and this one over on this side. Next, I am going to press this bottom crease up towards the wrong side, 1/2 inch. Next, I am going to press along this line towards the wrong side again. Now I will press along this line towards the wrong side again. Now I will press along this dotted line towards the wrong side. Finally, I will press one more time along this dotted line you see here towards the wrong side. That will leave me with a small rectangle that is my placket. Now I'm going to make a snip along the bottom of my placket. I will go from the bottom raw edge up to this bottom line on each of these interior lines. I've already done this one, so I started at the bottom raw edge and I went up to this line, and I'll do the same thing here. So I am snipping right along that crease up to that bottom line. Again, and again. So I now have 4 snips, and it just goes from the bottom raw edge up to this bottom line. Now that I've got my snips, I'm going to press my placket piece in half so that I can find the center of my piece. Now when I press with my iron, I'm going to be very sure that I keep the tip of my iron over on this far side so that I don't mess up any of the creases that I made in the previous step. Okay, I have pressed the front of my shirt in half to find the center, and I've done the same thing with my placket piece. Now I'm going to align the center creases with right sides together. Now that I have it pinned in place, I'm going to stitch along the dotted lines. So the dotted lines on your placket pattern piece indicate a stitching line. Those stitching lines go around the center rectangle. So it goes down this side, across the bottom crease, and then back up. Again, it's down this side, across the bottom crease. Do not sew all the way to the bottom of your placket piece. You will just sew down to the snip, across this bottom crease, and back up this side. Now that I've stitched along the center rectangle, I'm going to take my hem gauge and measure a 1/2 inch up from this bottom line, right along the center crease, and make a mark. Okay, so you can see the mark that I made here. Now I'm going to cut right along the center crease, stopping when I get to this line. And at that point, I'm going to make an upside down V. So I'm going to go from the mark I made to the outside corner of the rectangle. And the same thing on this side. So I'm stopping here and doing an upside down V by cutting to the outside corner of the rectangle. And this is what you're left with. Okay, now that I've cut along the center crease, I'm going to press along each of these stitching lines. So I will press the seam allowance towards the right side. So this is the right side of my shirt. I'm pressing the seam allowance towards this side, on this side and this side. Okay, I pressed those towards the right side. Now I'm going to flip the shirt over so the wrong side is facing up. And I'm going to move this left side out of the way, and we are just going to be working with the right side. You can see that I have the left side moved out of the way, and all you can see is the right side of the placket. Now what I'm going to do is fold this bottom piece up, and I'm going to bring this center triangle up inside the placket piece. So I'm folding this bottom crease of the right side of the placket up, right here, just this piece. Then I'm going to bring the center pieces up so that they're even with that. Now I will wrap the placket piece around those center pieces, and I will pin it in place. This will make sure that all of those snips and all the raw edges and everything is hidden completely within your placket. Okay, now that you've got everything pinned in place, you can choose how you'd like to stitch it. I prefer to stitch from the right side of my garment because that's what's going to be seen, obviously, from the outside. So I want to make sure that that stitching is absolutely perfect and even. So you can either use a fusible hem tape, like a wash away wonder tape or something, right along this seam right here to hold this in place, or you can simply take the pins and transfer them to the right side of the garment. Once you have your pins moved to the right side of the fabric, you can go ahead and stitch 1/8 inch from the edge of the placket piece along this outside edge and along the bottom. Okay, so I've stitched along this edge and along the bottom of this placket piece. Now I'm going to flip again to the wrong side, and I'm going to move the side I already stitched out of the way. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm going to press this rectangle, these bottom rectangles up, and I'm just going to fold the placket piece around so that it encloses all the raw edges and the seam that I made previously. Okay, so once I've got this pinned in place, I'm going to take my hem gauge again, and I'm going to measure 1/2 inch up from the bottom edge, and I'm going to go ahead and place a mark there. And since I like to sew on the right side of my fabric, what I'm actually going to do is make sure that my pin starts at that mark I made. And I'm going to place another pin along the bottom so that I know where I need to stop my stitching. Now, because I like to sew from the right side of my fabric, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to transfer all these pins to the right side of my fabric, and then I'm going to stitch along the outside edge of the placket, 1/8 inch away from the edge, all the way down to that bottom pin. I'm going to stop a 1/2 inch above the bottom of the placket piece. Okay, so I've stitched along the outside edge, the right side of this placket piece, from the top raw edge all the way down to a 1/2 inch above the bottom edge of my placket piece. Now it's easiest to go ahead and add buttonholes now because this piece is moving freely before you stitch it to the other placket piece at the bottom. When you are marking the placement for your buttonholes, you need to keep in mind that there is the 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom and the 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top here. So people ask all the time for tips and tricks on buttonholes, particularly when it comes to knit fabrics, and this is a must-have. It is Tearaway Embroidery Stabilizer. You can get it in a roll or in a small packet at pretty much any store that has sewing notions. So you're going to place this in between the fabric and the feed dogs. I'm going to put that here. And then I am going to go ahead and start my first buttonhole right at the very bottom of the placket. And I like to use my buttonhole foot as a guide. I kind of make sure that my placket piece is centered right on this buttonhole foot. And now I am going to let the needle down. Make sure I have my buttonhole settings all set. And honestly, the next part is just trusting your machine to do its job. So I have my hand along the fabric just so that it doesn't twist and turn as it's going, but I am absolutely not pushing or pulling the fabric at all. My machine is doing its job all on its own. So now you'll do the remainder of your buttonholes along your placket piece, and then we'll move on to stitching the plackets together. Okay, so we've done our buttonholes on our placket piece, and now you're just going to fold this right placket piece over the left one. And then you're just going to stitch a little rectangle right here. You can also make an X in the middle if you'd like. That's almost ready to wear tops are. And once you make that stitch, you are done.